CHAPTER IV. Corpus Christi, Mexican Smuggling, Spanish Rule in Mexico. Corpus Christi is near the head of the bay of the same name, formed by the entrance of the Nueces River into tidewater, and is on the west bank of that bay. At the time of its first occupancy by United States troops, there was a small Mexican hamlet there containing probably less than 100 souls. There was, in addition, a small American trading post at which goods were sold to Mexican smugglers. All goods were put up in compact packages of about 100 pounds each, suitable for loading on pack mules. 2 of these packages made a load for an ordinary Mexican mule, and 3 for the larger ones. The bulk of the trade was in leaf tobacco and domestic cotton cloths and calicos. The Mexicans had, before the arrival of the army, but little to offer in exchange except silver. The trade in tobacco was enormous, considering the population to be supplied. Almost every Mexican above the age of 10 years, and many much younger, smoked the cigarette. Nearly every Mexican carried a pouch of leaf tobacco, powdered by rolling in the hands, and a roll of corn husks to make wrappers. The cigarettes were made by the smokers as they used them. Up to the time of which I write, and for years afterwards, I think until the administration of President Juarez, the cultivation, manufacture, and sale of tobacco constituted a government monopoly, and paid the bulk of the revenue collected from internal sources. The price was enormously high, and made successful smuggling very profitable. The difficulty of obtaining tobacco is probably the reason why everybody, male and female, used it at that time. I know from my own experience that when I was at West Point, the fact that tobacco in every form was prohibited, and the mere possession of the weed severely punished, made the majority of the cadets, myself included, try to acquire the habit of using it. I failed utterly at the time and for many years afterward, but the majority accomplished the object of their youthful ambition. Under Spanish rule, Mexico was prohibited from producing anything that the mother country could supply. This rule excluded the cultivation of the grape, olive, and many other articles to which the soil and climate were well adapted. The country was governed for revenue only, and tobacco, which cannot be raised in Spain, but is indigenous to Mexico, offered a fine instrumentality for securing this prime object of government. The native population had been in the habit of using the weed from a period back of any recorded history of this continent. Bad habits, if not restrained by law or public opinion, spread more rapidly and universally than good ones, and the Spanish colonists adopted the use of tobacco almost as generally as the natives. Spain, therefore, in order to secure the largest revenue from this source, prohibited the cultivation, except in specified localities, and in these places farmed out the privilege at a very high price. The tobacco when raised could only be sold to the government, and the price to the consumer was limited only by the avarice of the authorities and the capacity of the people to pay. All laws for the government of the country were enacted in Spain, and the officers for their execution were appointed by the Crown and sent out to the new El Dorado. The Mexicans had been brought up ignorant of how to legislate or how to rule. When they gained their independence after many years of war, it was the most natural thing in the world that they should adopt as their own the laws then in existence. The only change was that Mexico became her own executor of the laws and the recipient of the revenues. The tobacco tax, yielding so large a revenue under the law as it stood, was one of the last, if not the very last, of the obnoxious imposts to be repealed. Now the citizens are allowed to cultivate any crops the soil will yield. Tobacco is cheap and every quality can be produced. Its use is by no means so general as when I first visited the country.